Hi guys, ancient Egypt begins quietly. It does not begin with noise or movement that the modern mind expects. It begins with silence. A long stretch of river. A slow, steady sun rising over the horizon. The Nile River moves gently, as if it has always known where it is going and has never needed to hurry. Along its banks, life exists in a simple rhythm. Not fast. Not complex. Just steady, like breathing. People wake when the light begins to spread across the land. There is no sharp alarm. No sudden sound. Only the gradual warming of the world. Houses made of mud brick hold the coolness of the night for a while, and then slowly release it as the morning arrives. Inside these homes, families begin their day without rush. The air is quiet. Dust rests softly in corners where light touches it. A clay pot may already hold water from the previous day, slightly warm now, but still drinkable. People drink slowly, not thinking of time. Outside, the land is already awake in its own way. Farmers step onto soft soil near the river. The ground is rich and dark, shaped by the Nile's yearly rhythm. It is not dry desert here, at least not fully. It is a meeting place between water and sand, between life and emptiness. They walk slowly, often barefoot, feeling the earth under their feet. It is familiar ground. They do not need to look down often. Their bodies already know where they are. Work begins without ceremony. A wooden plow may be pulled by cattle, moving through soil that gives way easily after the flood season. The movement is slow and repetitive. Back and forth. Back and forth. The sound of wood against earth is soft and steady. There is no need for urgency. The river has already done much of the preparation. It flooded months ago, leaving behind fertile ground. Life here depends on patience, not speed. Farther away, small irrigation channels carry water into fields. These channels are simple. Dug by hand. Maintained carefully. Water moves through them like a quiet visitor, not rushing, just flowing. People watch it sometimes, not because they must, but because it is calming. Water means survival. Water means continuity. Water means tomorrow will likely come the same way today did. In the villages, other kinds of daily life begin. Women prepare food inside shaded courtyards. Bread is one of the most common parts of life. Grain is ground slowly using stone tools. The motion is repetitive, almost meditative. Press. Turn. Press again. Flour gathers like fine dust. It sticks lightly to fingers and surfaces. Water is added. Dough is formed. Not rushed. Not precise like modern baking. It is shaped by feel and memory. Small ovens made of clay warm up slowly. Heat builds inside them like a hidden presence. Bread is placed inside, and the smell begins to spread. It is simple, earthy, and familiar to everyone. Children often stay nearby. They do not move far. The village is their world. They watch adults work, sometimes helping, sometimes simply observing. Learning is not formal. It happens by watching repetition. A child might carry water in a small container. Not too full. Not too heavy. Walking carefully so nothing spills. This small task is part of life. Not important in a dramatic sense, but important in the way daily survival is built. Animals move through the village as well. Goats, chickens, sometimes cattle. They are not separate from life. They are part of it. Their sounds blend into the environment without disruption. A goat may pass through a narrow path, pausing briefly near a doorway, then continuing on. No one is surprised. Everything has its place, even movement. The sun rises higher. Shadows shorten. Work continues. Some people repair tools. Others gather materials. Rope is made from plant fibers. Baskets are woven with slow, practiced hands. Each movement has been repeated many times before. There is no need to think deeply about it anymore. The body remembers. In some homes, clay vessels are shaped. Wet earth is formed into containers. Hands smooth the surface, pressing gently. These objects will later hold water, grain, oil, or nothing at all until needed. Nothing is wasted. Everything is used again and again. As midday approaches, the heat grows stronger. The air becomes still. Movement slows naturally, not because of rule, but because of comfort. People rest in shade. Under roofs. Under trees. Along walls that block the sun. Silence becomes more noticeable now. Even sound feels slower in the heat. A distant hammer striking stone. A soft conversation. A child laughing briefly before becoming quiet again. Everything seems to stretch, as if time itself is resting. The Nile continues its presence in the background. Always there. Always moving. It does not change its pace for anyone. Some people sit near its edge. Watching. Thinking, but not in a heavy way. Just letting thoughts drift like the water. In ancient Egypt, life is not divided into strict segments the way it is in later worlds. Work and rest blend into each other. Morning becomes afternoon without sharp boundaries. Evening will come later, slowly, with cooler air and longer shadows. But for now, everything remains in the soft middle of the day. And in this middle space, life continues quietly. Simple tasks are done. Repeated movements are made. Small responsibilities are carried without pressure. There is no expectation for anything to become more than it is. A farmer tends his field. A potter shapes clay. A child carries water. A river flows beside them all. And the day continues, gently, without hurry. As the sun slowly begins to shift downward, the light over ancient Egypt changes in a quiet way. It is not sudden. It does not fall quickly. It simply softens. The harsh brightness of midday begins to loosen its grip on the land, and the world feels a little easier to breathe in. Shadows grow longer across the ground. They stretch gently, as if the earth is becoming tired and ready to rest. In the villages along the Nile, people begin to feel this change without needing to speak about it. There is no announcement of evening. There is only a shared understanding that the hardest part of the day is passing. Work does not stop all at once. It slows. A farmer may finish guiding a tool through soil one last time before pausing. His hands are dry from the sun, slightly rough from repeated motion. He stands still for a moment, looking over the field, not with urgency, but with quiet acceptance. The field is not finished. It never truly is. But for today, it is enough. Nearby, irrigation water continues to move through small channels. It glints softly in the lower light. It does not hurry. It never hurries. It only follows its path, as it always has. People begin to return toward their homes in small, unorganized groups. There is no single moment when work ends. It fades, like sound slowly disappearing into distance. Footsteps along dusty paths are unhurried. The ground is still warm beneath them. Inside the homes, the air is different. It feels cooler now, as the sun lowers. Mud brick walls that held heat during the day begin to release it. The interiors become more comfortable, more quiet. Small courtyards fill again with movement. Water is poured into bowls for washing hands and faces. Dust from the day is gently removed. Not in a rushed or formal way, but in the simple need to feel clean again after hours under the sun. Food preparation begins again, slowly, almost automatically. Grain that was stored earlier is brought out. Bread that was baked in the morning may now be shared again, softened slightly by time. Sometimes it is dipped into small amounts of oil or eaten with simple vegetables. Meals are not elaborate. They are steady. Familiar. a rhythm the body recognizes without needing thought. In some homes, a pot may simmer over a small clay hearth. The smell of cooked grain or lentils drifts softly through the air. It is not strong. It does not overwhelm. It simply exists, like everything else in the evening. Children return from wherever they have been during the day. Their movements are slower now. Less energy, more quietness. They sit near family members, sometimes listening, sometimes simply watching the light fade through doorways. Conversation is soft. Not many words are needed. Most things have already been lived through during the day. Outside, the Nile reflects the sky differently now. The water darkens slightly as the sun lowers further. It becomes smoother, calmer in appearance. Small ripples catch the last light in scattered lines. Some people sit near it again. Not to work. Just to be near it. The river is part of their lives in a way that does not require attention. It is always present, always continuing, always moving forward without hesitation. As evening deepens, the village begins to settle. Animals are gathered or guided into safer spaces. Chickens move into enclosed areas. Goats are led gently. The sounds of them become fewer. The land grows quieter. The heat fades slowly into memory. Now the air feels softer, cooler, more forgiving. Inside homes, small lamps or oil flames may be lit. Their light is not strong. It does not push darkness away completely. It only creates small circles of visibility in rooms that were once filled with daylight. Walls glow faintly in this light. Shadows gather in corners again, but they are not frightening. They are part of the space. People sit together. Some repair small items. A piece of rope. A basket etch. A tool handle. These tasks are not urgent. They are done with patience, hands moving slowly, almost without thinking. Others remain still. Resting. Thinking in quiet, gentle ways that do not form into clear thoughts. The day has already been full. There is no need to fill the evening with more. Outside, the sky deepens. The colors shift from warm tones to cooler ones. Eventually, stars begin to appear, one by one, as if the sky is remembering itself. They are not new. They have always been there. But now they become visible again. The Nile reflects them faintly in its surface, as if copying the sky in softer form. In this moment, ancient Egypt feels still. Not empty. Not silent in a heavy way. But balanced. As if everything has reached its natural pause. Families prepare for sleep. Mats or simple bedding are arranged. Bodies settle into familiar positions. The day leaves slowly, not all at once, but in stages. Breathing becomes deeper. Lighter. More regular. Outside sounds fade completely now. The river continues. The land rests beside it. And the night settles over everything with a calm that feels almost endless. No part of life here feels rushed at this hour. There is only the quiet understanding that tomorrow will come in the same slow way, bringing the same rhythm again. And so, the village sleeps. Gently. Completely. Without resistance. Night in ancient Egypt does not arrive with suddenness. It settles. Slowly. Like a soft cloth being placed over the world. The village that was once filled with movement and heat becomes still again. Not empty, but resting. The sounds that remain are faint and spaced apart. A distant insect. A soft wind moving through palm leaves. The Nile continuing its quiet presence, always flowing, always unchanged. Inside homes, sleep deepens. But even in sleep, life in ancient Egypt does not feel disconnected. It feels continuous, as if the day never fully breaks away from the night. Everything is part of the same long rhythm. As darkness holds the land, the structure of daily life becomes more visible in another way. Not through movement, but through understanding. Homes in ancient Egypt are simple, but they are carefully shaped for their purpose. Most are made of mud brick, formed from earth mixed with water and dried under the sun. These walls are thick enough to keep out much of the heat during the day and hold a little warmth during the night. Inside, space is organized with quiet practicality. There is often a main room where daily life happens. Eating, resting, small tasks. Nearby may be a storage area for grain, tools, or woven baskets. Everything has a place, even if that place is not defined in strict ways. There is no excess. There is only what is needed. Families sleep close together. Not because of lack of imagination, but because closeness is part of survival and comfort. The night outside can be cool, and shared warmth inside makes the darkness feel less distant. Children sleep near parents. Elders rest where they feel most comfortable. The arrangement is not formal. It is natural, shaped by habit and care. As the night continues, the idea of time becomes softer. There is no clear division between hours. Only the gradual passing of darkness. Some people wake briefly during the night. Not because something demands attention, but because bodies naturally shift between rest and wakefulness. A small movement. A quiet adjustment of position. Then sleep returns again. Outside, the Nile continues its long path. It does not change at night. It does not slow or speed up. It remains the same steady presence that shaped all daily life. Along its banks, the land is quiet. Fields that were worked during the day now rest under darkness. Irrigation channels are still. Tools left outside wait for morning light again. Everything that required effort is paused. Everything that requires patience continues inwardly. In ancient Egypt, even when people are not active, life is not considered stopped. It is simply in a different state. The rhythm of households is deeply tied to roles that exist without strict instruction. Within a family, responsibilities are understood rather than spoken constantly. Some care for food preparation. Some tend tools or materials. Some look after children or elders. These roles are not rigid in the way modern systems might define them. They are flexible, shaped by need and circumstance. What matters is that everything continues smoothly. Not quickly. Not efficiently in a modern sense. But steadily. In the early hours before dawn, when the sky is still at its darkest, the world feels especially quiet. This is the moment when Egypt seems to pause completely. Even the wind feels minimal. Even sound feels distant. And yet, life is already preparing to begin again. Somewhere, a person may wake before light returns. Not fully alert at first, but slowly becoming aware of the space around them. The cool air inside the home. The faint outline of objects in darkness. There is no rush to rise. The world is not yet ready. So they wait quietly until the first sign of morning appears. This transition between night and day is subtle. It is not marked by sudden brightness. It begins as a faint shift in the sky. Darkness loosens slightly. Shapes become more defined. The river reflects a hint of change before most people even notice. And in this slow arrival of morning, ancient Egyptian life prepares itself again. Not with urgency, but with recognition. Another day will begin. The same river will continue flowing. The same fields will wait. The same homes will open their doors. And the same gentle rhythm of life will resume once more, as it always has, without interruption. Before the sun fully returns, ancient Egypt exists in a kind of in-between world. The sky is not yet bright. But it is no longer fully dark. This moment, just before morning, feels almost suspended, as if the world is waiting for permission to begin again. Inside the homes, people begin to wake in slow stages. There is no sudden rising. No sharp movement. Only gradual awareness. A hand shifting slightly under woven cloth. A slow opening of eyes. The quiet recognition of the room that was there all night, unchanged and familiar. The air feels cooler now than it did during the evening. Night has taken away the warmth, leaving behind a gentle chill that touches skin softly, not harshly. Some people sit up first. Others remain lying down for a while longer. There is no fixed rule for waking. The body decides its own pace. Outside, the first hint of light begins to touch the edges of the horizon. It is faint at first, almost unnoticeable. But it spreads slowly, like a soft memory returning to the land. The Nile reflects this change even before the sky fully brightens. Its surface catches the earliest light and stretches it into thin lines that move gently with the water. In the villages, small movements begin. A door is opened quietly. A pot of water is reached for. Hands are washed in simple, repeated motions that have been done countless times before. Not for ceremony, but for comfort. For readiness. The morning is not rushed. It unfolds. Inside kitchens or simple cooking spaces, fire may be rekindled. Not dramatically. Not with effort that demands attention. Just enough to bring warmth back into daily life. Clay hearths receive small pieces of fuel. Flames rise slowly, as if waking up themselves. The light they produce is soft, flickering gently against walls still holding the memory of night. Food preparation begins in the earliest form. Bread that was stored from the previous day may be softened slightly. Grain may be ground again using stone tools. The motion is familiar. Pressing. Turning. Repeating. There is a quiet rhythm in these actions. The sound of stone against grain is steady and low. It does not disturb the morning silence. It becomes part of it. Children begin to move again as well. Not quickly. They wake in slower stages than the world outside. Some sit near family members, watching the small tasks of morning unfold. Others help in simple ways, carrying water, holding small containers, or simply staying close where they feel safe. Learning in ancient Egypt is not separated from life. It is woven into it. Every action observed becomes a lesson. Every repetition becomes memory. Outside, the land is now clearly visible. The sun has not fully risen yet, but its presence is already felt. Shadows begin to form again, though they are softer than before. The fields near the Nile appear calm in early light. Soil that was worked days ago rests quietly. Irrigation channels lie still, waiting for use again. Animals begin to move more actively now. Goats step out from enclosed spaces. Birds begin their scattered calls. Even these sounds feel gentle, not overwhelming. They blend into the morning rather than interrupt it. People begin to leave their homes in small groups. Some head toward fields. Some toward workshops. Some toward the river. Each person moves with awareness of their role, but without tension. The day is not a challenge. It is a continuation. Tools are carried carefully. Wooden implements for farming. Stone tools for shaping or cutting. Baskets for gathering. Each object is simple, but each one carries importance through repetition. In the fields, the first real work of the day begins. The soil is cooler now than it will be later. Easier to touch. Easier to shape. Farmers walk slowly through their land, observing what needs attention. Not everything requires action. Some things only require watching. Water channels are checked. Small adjustments are made if needed. Nothing is rushed. Everything is maintained through steady care over time. The Nile remains close in awareness even when not directly seen. It is always the source of timing, of rhythm, of expectation. In workshops within villages, different kinds of work begin. Pottery is shaped again. Baskets are woven again. Tools are repaired again. Each movement repeats what has been done before, sometimes for years, sometimes for generations. There is comfort in this repetition. It does not demand invention. It asks only for consistency. As the sun rises higher, the day fully begins to form. But even now, nothing feels sudden. Everything grows into itself. Light expands slowly across the land. Warmth returns gradually. And life continues in its steady, familiar pattern. Morning in ancient Egypt is not a beginning that feels new. It is a continuation of something that never truly stopped. As the morning grows stronger, the light over ancient Egypt becomes steadier, clearer, and more present. It does not arrive quickly. It spreads slowly across the land, touching fields first, then paths, then the quiet surfaces of village homes. By this time, daily life is already fully in motion, though it never truly began with a sharp moment. It only shifted from one state into another. In the farming lands near the Nile, the rhythm of work is deeply tied to the river itself. Everything begins with water. Everything returns to water. Farmers walk along irrigation channels that were shaped by hand over many seasons. These channels are not large or complex in appearance. They are simple lines in the earth, carefully maintained, carefully adjusted when needed. Water moves through them in a slow, controlled flow. Not rushing. Not still. Just moving. People observe it with quiet attention, because water is not only part of farming. It is the center of survival. Fields that were shaped by the annual flooding of the Nile hold a deep, dark soil. It is soft in some places, firmer in others, depending on moisture and use. Farmers step into it without hesitation. Their feet are used to this ground. Their bodies understand its texture. Work in the fields follows a familiar pattern. Some prepare soil. Some guide simple plows pulled by animals. Some clear small spaces for planting. The movements are repeated so often that they no longer feel like separate actions. They become one continuous flow of effort. Back and forth. Step by step. Pause. Adjust. Continue. There is no urgency in this rhythm. The land does not demand speed. It responds to patience. Nearby, the Nile continues its quiet dominance over all activity. It is not only a river. It is a system of timing. A system of planning. A system of life itself. Its floods determine when planting begins. Its retreat determines when harvesting can happen. Its presence determines where villages exist and where they cannot. People do not fight this pattern. They align with it. In village centers, administration and organization also take place, though not in ways that feel separate from daily life. Some individuals are responsible for measuring grain. Others for recording supplies. Others for organizing labor during larger agricultural tasks. These roles are carried out in simple spaces, often open-air courtyards or small rooms where tools and records are kept. Writing exists here, but it is not used for constant communication. It is used for memory. For storage of information. For keeping track of what has been gathered, what has been distributed, what has been owed. The process is slow and careful. Marks are made on surfaces with deliberate movement. Each symbol holds meaning that is understood by those trained to read it. Even this administrative work is part of the same rhythm as farming. It does not stand apart from life. It supports it quietly. In households, daily routines continue alongside these larger systems. Food preparation remains steady. Bread is baked in simple ovens made of clay. Grain is ground with repeated stone movements. Water is carried in balanced containers. Every task is familiar. Every task has been done many times before. Children often observe these processes closely. Not through formal instruction, but through presence. Through watching hands move. Through listening to sounds of work. Through repeating small actions themselves. In this way, knowledge passes slowly, without pressure. In the heat of late morning, the land begins to warm again. Not yet the full intensity of midday, but a steady rise in temperature. Shadows shorten. Air becomes heavier. Work adjusts naturally to this change. Some tasks slow down. Some move into shaded areas. Some pause temporarily. There is no strict division between working time and resting time. The environment itself guides the rhythm. In more structured agricultural areas, larger coordination takes place during certain seasons. Groups of workers may gather for planting or harvesting, depending on the cycle of the river and the land. These gatherings are not chaotic. They are organized through long-established patterns. People know where to go, what to do, how to contribute. Even without constant instruction, the system functions through shared understanding. At the edge of fields, simple tools rest when not in use. Wooden plows, stone blades, ropes made from plant fibers. Each item is maintained with care, because replacing them is not immediate. Everything is repaired, reused, and preserved as long as possible. Nothing is treated as disposable. By midday, the sun becomes stronger again. The land grows still in its own way. Not silent, but steady. Even the wind feels slower in the heat. People rest in shaded areas when possible. Under trees. Beside walls. Inside homes with thick mud brick insulation. This pause is not separate from work. It is part of it. Rest allows continuation. Continuation allows survival. The cycle remains balanced. And through it all, the Nile continues to move. Unchanged. Uninterrupted. Always present beneath every action, every routine, every quiet moment of daily life. By the time the sun reaches its highest point, ancient Egypt settles into a different kind of stillness. It is not silence. It is a slowing. A soft pause in movement that spreads across villages, fields, and riverbanks at the same time, as if the entire land agrees without speaking. The heat becomes more noticeable now. It rests over the ground like a heavy but familiar presence. People adjust to it the same way they adjust to everything else in daily life, quietly, without complaint, without urgency. In the farming areas, work continues, but at a gentler pace. Some tasks move into shaded spaces. Some pause entirely until the air becomes easier later in the day. And some continue steadily, especially those tied directly to water and animals, because these responsibilities cannot simply be delayed for long. But alongside farming, another layer of daily life continues in villages and towns. Crafts. Small, steady forms of making that support everything else. In shaded courtyards or simple open workshops, potters shape clay with slow hands. The clay is soft at first, responsive to pressure. It turns under fingers, forming bowls, jars, containers of many sizes. Each shape is familiar. Not experimental. Not rushed. Just refined through repetition. The wheel, when used, turns at a steady pace. Not fast. Not slow. Just enough to guide the material into form. Water is occasionally added to smooth the surface. Hands move in circular motions, repeating the same gestures over and over until the object feels complete. Nearby, other crafts take place. Weaving is one of them. Plant fibers are collected and dried, then pulled into strands. These strands are interlaced carefully, forming baskets, mats, and storage items. The rhythm of weaving is quiet and steady. Pull. Cross. Press. Repeat. It is work that allows the mind to settle into repetition without strain. Nothing in it demands sudden thought. Everything in it relies on patience. In some spaces, simple woodworking is done. Not large construction. Just shaping small tools, repairing handles, reinforcing frames. Wood is measured by eye and experience rather than strict instruments. The sound of carving is soft and controlled. Shavings fall gently to the ground, forming small piles that are cleaned later or reused. Even in these crafts, there is a sense of balance. Nothing is excessive. Nothing is rushed. Everything is shaped for use, not display. As the day continues at its highest warmth, movement in general becomes minimal. People rest where they can. Some lie down inside homes where the thick walls hold cooler air. Others sit quietly under shade, letting the heat pass over them. Conversation, when it happens, is slow, short, unhurried. There is no pressure to fill silence. Silence is accepted as part of the day. In temples, life continues in a more structured but still quiet form. These spaces are not only places of worship, but also centers of organization and storage. Offerings are brought in small amounts. Food, grain, simple goods from farming and craft. These items are handled carefully, recorded, and placed where needed. The process is calm, not emotional, not loud. It follows established patterns that have been practiced for generations. Inside temple courtyards, stone surfaces hold warmth from the sun. Shadows move slowly across carved walls. Figures and symbols remain still, watching over the space in a way that feels permanent. Workers within these spaces perform their duties quietly. Cleaning, organizing, maintaining. Everything is done with care, not speed. Outside the temple, daily life continues in parallel. Markets may operate in a subdued way during the hotter hours. Not full activity. Just small exchanges. A basket of grain for a tool. A piece of cloth for food. Trade is simple and practical, based on immediate needs rather than accumulation. People understand value through use, not excess. As afternoon begins to slowly approach, the intensity of the sun remains strong, but something subtle begins to shift again. The light changes angle. Shadows begin to stretch slightly. The land prepares, once more, for transition. Work will not end yet, but it will begin to ease. And in this easing, the rhythm of ancient Egypt continues its steady, familiar cycle, never breaking, never rushing, always returning to balance. As the afternoon slowly begins to soften, ancient Egypt starts its quiet return toward evening. The change is not sudden. It is gradual. Almost unnoticeable at first. The sun is still present, still warm, still steady in the sky. But something in the air begins to shift, as if the land itself understands that the longest part of the day is slowly passing. In the fields, movement becomes lighter. Farmers continue their work, but the intensity has eased. The hardest tasks were already done earlier, when the morning was cooler and the body had more energy. Now, what remains is maintenance. Small adjustments. Checking irrigation channels again. Guiding animals back along familiar paths. Observing the condition of soil and crops without rushing to change anything. The land does not require constant action. It requires attention. And attention, in this time of day, becomes quieter. In villages, people begin to return from distant work areas. The paths that were scattered with activity in the morning now see a slow flow of returning movement. Not crowds. Just individuals and small groups, each moving at their own pace. Some carry tools over their shoulders. Others carry baskets or simple bundles of materials. Their steps are steady, unhurried, familiar with the terrain. Dust rises lightly under their feet and settles again almost immediately. There is no noise of urgency. Only the soft presence of people coming back together after hours apart. Inside homes, preparations for the later part of the day begin again. Water is brought in small containers. Surfaces are cleaned in simple, repeated motions. Food preparation resumes in a calmer form than the morning. Not the beginning of work, but its continuation into rest. Bread may be softened or shared. Simple stews or grain-based meals may be prepared depending on what is available. The smell of cooking spreads gently through courtyards and doorways, blending with the fading warmth of the day. Children return more fully now. Their energy is different from the morning. Less focused on observation, more on quiet movement and small interactions. They sit near family members, sometimes helping, sometimes resting, sometimes simply watching the changing light. Learning continues without instruction. Through presence. Through repetition. Through the ordinary flow of life around them. In workshops, final tasks of the day are completed. Pottery that was shaped earlier is left to dry. Woven items are set aside in organized stacks. Tools are cleaned and placed carefully for the next day. Nothing is abandoned. Everything is given a place of rest. As the sun lowers further, shadows stretch long across the land again. But this time, they feel different from the morning. Heavier. Softer. More settled. The heat begins to ease, slowly releasing its hold on the earth. People begin to gather in more relaxed spaces. Courtyards become places of quiet conversation. Doorways remain open to catch the cooling air. Some sit in silence, simply observing the changing sky. Others speak softly, exchanging small pieces of information about the day. Nothing urgent. Nothing loud. Just the gentle continuation of shared life. Near the Nile, the water reflects the sky in deeper tones now. The surface appears calmer as the wind reduces. Small ripples move across it like slow breathing. People may sit nearby again, not for work, but for presence. The river does not change its rhythm. It continues as it always has. In temples, the final structured activities of the day begin to conclude. Offerings are organized. Spaces are cleaned. Records are updated in careful, deliberate marks. The atmosphere remains controlled and quiet. Everything follows established order, without deviation. As evening approaches more clearly, the entire landscape begins to settle. Animals are gathered. Tools are stored. Work areas grow still. The sound of daily labor fades gradually into background quiet. There is no single moment when the day ends. It dissolves. Like light leaving the sky slowly. Inside homes, lamps or small flames may be prepared again. The first signs of night readiness appear gently. Light is not yet needed, but it is anticipated. People prepare spaces for rest without haste. Mats are arranged. Water is set aside. The final small tasks of the day are completed almost automatically. And as the sun finally lowers toward the horizon, ancient Egypt begins its transition once more. Not into silence. Not into emptiness. But into another version of the same steady rhythm. A rhythm that never fully stops. Only changes shape. Evening in ancient Egypt arrives without urgency. It does not announce itself. It simply replaces the day, slowly and quietly, as if the land has always known this moment would come. The sunlight fades into a softer tone. Not gone at once. Just less present. Shadows grow longer again, stretching across fields, paths, and the edges of homes. The world feels less bright, but also less heavy. In the villages, movement slows into calm. People who were still working in the late afternoon now return fully to their homes. The return is not hurried. There is no need to rush toward anything. The day's labor has already reached its natural end. Tools are placed down carefully. Not thrown. Not abandoned. Just set where they belong. The fields near the Nile grow quiet again. Irrigation channels reflect the last light in thin, fading lines. The soil rests after a full cycle of attention. Animals are guided into their nighttime spaces with gentle familiarity. Everything returns to order. Not a strict order, but a living one. Inside homes, evening becomes the center of life. The heat that once filled the day is now replaced by a cooler air that moves softly through doorways and courtyards. People gather inside or near their homes, depending on the weather and the season. There is no formal gathering. Only closeness. Families sit together in simple arrangements. Some lean against walls. Some sit on woven mats. Some remain standing for a while before settling. Food is shared again in smaller portions than the midday meal. Not because of lack, but because the evening does not require heaviness. Meals are simple. Bread. Grain-based dishes. Occasionally vegetables or small additions depending on the season. Eating is slow. Unhurried. Accompanied by quiet conversation or comfortable silence. Children stay close, their energy now softer than earlier in the day. They listen more than they speak. Observe more than they move. Evening is often a time when stories appear naturally. Not as formal teaching, but as memory shared aloud. Elders may speak about past seasons. About floods that came gently or strongly. About harvests that were abundant or modest. About changes in the land that were felt over time rather than marked suddenly. These stories are not dramatic. They are steady. Like the river itself. They are told slowly, with pauses that allow the listener to absorb each moment. Outside, the Nile reflects the deepening sky. The water darkens slightly, becoming smoother as the wind reduces. Its movement is still present, but less visible in the fading light. It continues without interruption. As it always does. In some areas, small lamps or oil flames begin to glow. These lights are not strong. They do not push away darkness completely. They only create small spaces of visibility. Warm circles of light inside homes. Soft outlines of people and objects. Walls reflect a gentle flicker, making the interior feel contained and calm. The contrast between light and darkness is not sharp. It is gradual. Like everything else in this world. Outside activity nearly disappears by this point. Paths become empty. Fields are still. Workplaces are closed for the day. Even the sounds of movement become rare. What remains is only the presence of night beginning to settle fully. Within homes, final routines take place before sleep. Water is set aside. Simple cleaning is done. Sleeping spaces are prepared with familiar care. These actions are not rushed, but they are natural, almost automatic. The body knows what comes next. Conversation becomes less frequent now. Silence grows more comfortable. People settle into stillness without resistance. The air outside continues to cool. The Nile continues its slow, endless flow. And above everything, the sky deepens into night once more. Stars appear again, one by one, as if they are returning rather than arriving. They are steady. Constant. Unchanging. Ancient Egypt rests beneath them. Not in emptiness, but in balance. A balance that has repeated for generations without needing to be altered. And as the night fully arrives, the land does not feel like it has ended its day. It feels like it has simply moved into another part of the same long, quiet rhythm. Night settles more deeply now over ancient Egypt. It is no longer the soft beginning of darkness. It is the full presence of it. A steady, quiet covering that stretches across fields, villages, and the long, patient river. The stars are clearer now. They do not feel distant in a dramatic sense. They feel familiar. As if they have always been there, simply waiting for the sky to grow dark enough to reveal them again. Inside the homes, sleep begins to take hold more fully. People lie down in simple arrangements that have already become part of habit. Mats on packed earth floors. Light coverings made of woven material. Bodies resting close together for warmth and comfort. There is no strict ritual for falling asleep. It happens slowly. Naturally. Like the day releasing its hold on the mind. Breathing becomes slower. Thoughts become less structured. Awareness fades in gentle layers rather than all at once. Outside, the village is almost completely still. There are no movements in the fields now. No tools being used. No footsteps on paths. Only the faint presence of the Nile, continuing its movement without interruption. It does not change for night. It does not pause for sleep. It simply continues, as it always has. In some homes, a faint light may still remain for a short while. An oil flame or small lamp, kept low. Not for activity. Only for presence. A soft reminder of space before full darkness takes over. Eventually, even these lights are extinguished. One by one. And the village becomes fully dark. But not empty. Darkness in ancient Egypt is not something separate from life. It is part of its cycle. A necessary phase, like rest within breathing. As the night deepens, sleep becomes the dominant state across the land. People sleep in cycles, not always in one uninterrupted stretch. Some may wake briefly during the night, adjusting position, then drift back into rest. There is no urgency in these awakenings. No demand from the world outside. Only the quiet presence of time passing slowly. The air grows cooler during these hours. Walls of mud brick retain the memory of daytime warmth but gradually release it. The temperature becomes balanced, comfortable in its stillness. Outside, the Nile reflects almost no light now. It is present, but hidden. Moving, but unseen. Its existence is felt more than observed. Along its banks, the land is fully at rest. Fields are dark silhouettes. Irrigation channels are invisible, though still there. Animals are still. Even sound seems reduced to its smallest form. Occasional night insects. A distant, soft movement of wind. Nothing more. In larger settlements or administrative areas, a quiet sense of watchfulness may remain. Not activity. Just awareness. A person or two may stay awake longer than others, not out of fear, but out of routine responsibility. To observe. To ensure that nothing unusual disturbs the stillness. But even this watchfulness is calm. It blends into the silence rather than breaking it. Temples, too, rest in darkness now. Their stone structures hold the memory of the day's rituals and movements. But at night, they become still forms in the landscape. Their presence is quiet, almost timeless. As if they are simply part of the earth itself. The night continues without interruption. Hours pass without marked change. Time in this darkness does not feel divided. It feels continuous. Unbroken. Like the river itself. Inside homes, sleep deepens further. Dreams may come and go, though they are not described or recorded in detail by everyone. For many, sleep is simply rest. A return of energy. A pause between days. And as the deepest part of the night arrives, everything in ancient Egypt reaches its quietest point. Not a silence that feels empty. But a silence that feels complete. The land is fully at rest. The river continues. The stars remain above. And life, though still present, is hidden for a while beneath the calm weight of night. The deepest part of the night in ancient Egypt does not feel like an ending. It feels like a long pause held gently between one day and the next. Everything is still. Everything is resting. And yet, nothing is truly absent. The Nile continues its slow movement, unseen in the darkness, but always present beneath the silence. Stars remain steady above the land, unchanged by time, unchanged by human life below them. Inside the villages, sleep holds the people quietly. Not in one single uniform way, but in soft layers of rest. Some sleep deeply. Some drift in lighter stages of awareness. Some briefly wake, then return to sleep without effort or concern. The night does not demand perfection in rest. It simply allows it. The air remains cool and balanced during these hours. Walls of homes hold a memory of the day's warmth, but release it slowly into the night. Everything becomes steady in temperature, steady in feeling. Even time feels less divided here. It does not move in sharp steps. It flows. Like the river. In the quietest moments before dawn, the world feels almost suspended again. The darkness is still present, but it is no longer absolute. There is a subtle sense that change is approaching. Not quickly. Not visibly at first. But quietly, beneath everything. And then, very slowly, the sky begins to shift. Not yet light. Not yet day. Just a faint easing of darkness at the edge of the horizon. This is the beginning of return. In ancient Egypt, this return is not seen as a sudden event. It is expected. It is part of the natural order that has already been experienced countless times before. Homes begin to stir again in the earliest way. Not fully awake, but gently aware. The body senses the change before the mind fully understands it. Outside, the Nile begins to reflect the slightest hint of change in the sky. Its surface remains calm, but it carries the first suggestion of morning. Fields are still dark, but no longer fully hidden. Shapes begin to reappear in soft outlines. The world is preparing itself again. Slowly. Patiently. As always. People will rise soon, just as they did before. They will return to their routines. To water. To soil. To grain. To tools. To the same steady rhythm that shaped every previous day. Nothing about this return feels new in a dramatic sense. It feels familiar. Comforting in its repetition. The cycle of life in ancient Egypt is not built on change. It is built on continuity. Morning follows night. Work follows rest. Rest follows work. The river continues without interruption. The land responds without resistance. And human life moves within this pattern like something gently held by time itself. As the first light of dawn finally begins to appear, the darkness does not disappear suddenly. It fades. Softly. Like a breath released slowly. The sky opens into another day. And ancient Egypt wakes again. Not as something new. But as something that has always been continuing. Always returning. Always repeating in the same quiet, steady rhythm. And in that rhythm, life carries on. Simple. Patient. Endless in its calm continuity. Before anything in ancient Egypt truly begins, there is always a quiet moment that belongs neither to night nor to day. It is the moment of waiting. A soft space in time where everything feels paused, as if the world is holding its breath without tension. The sky is still dark, but not as deep as before. It is lighter in a way that cannot yet be called morning, but no longer feels like full night. This is where life begins again, not suddenly, not loudly, but as a slow return of awareness. Inside the homes, people are still resting. But sleep begins to change shape. It is no longer deep and heavy. It becomes lighter, more fragile, easier to drift out of. A hand may move slightly. A body may turn. A face may tilt toward faint light that is not yet visible. And then, without effort, people begin to wake again. Not all at once. Not as a group. But as individuals responding to something larger than themselves. The village does not wake, it unfolds into wakefulness. Some people sit up first, quietly observing the dim space around them. The walls are still dark, but they are no longer invisible. Shapes return slowly. The outline of baskets. The curve of storage jars. The simple geometry of daily life. The air inside homes is cool now. Cool in a way that feels clean, almost refreshing after the long heat of yesterday. People take a moment before moving. Not because they are tired. But because movement itself has not yet fully returned to the body. And so, everything begins gently. Water is reached for in clay containers. Hands are dipped slowly. Faces are touched with cool moisture. Not as ritual, but as transition. A way of telling the body that the day is coming back. Outside, the Nile is already awake in its own silent way. It has never stopped. It never stops. It continues through night and day without difference, without change in its purpose. In the faint light, its surface begins to show the first reflection of sky again. A thin line of brightness appears far in the distance. Not strong. Not defined. Just present. Fields near the river are still quiet. But they are no longer completely hidden. Shapes begin to return. Trees become visible again as dark silhouettes against a slowly lightening horizon. The land is not active yet. But it is no longer asleep. And that difference is enough. Inside homes, morning tasks begin slowly. Fire is prepared with care, not urgency. Small pieces of fuel are placed together. A flame appears, first uncertain, then steady. It does not grow quickly. It settles into itself. The light it produces is warm and small, illuminating only a part of the room. This small light is enough. Enough for what comes next. Grain is brought out from storage spaces. Containers are opened carefully. Nothing is rushed or shaken. Even storage itself feels like part of a quiet system, everything placed where it should be, everything remembered through repetition. Grinding begins again. The stone tools move in familiar circular motions. Pressing grain. Turning it. Reducing it slowly into flour. The sound is soft. Not sharp. Not disruptive. It blends into the morning like another layer of silence. Outside, other homes begin similar routines. Smoke rises faintly in scattered places across the village. Not heavy smoke. Just signs of life returning. One by one, people begin to step outside. The ground beneath their feet is cool. Still holding the memory of night. Each step feels grounded, familiar. The village paths are unchanged. They do not need to be. They are part of the same rhythm that has existed for generations. As more people gather outside, the sense of shared life becomes present again. Not through conversation, but through presence. Seeing others begin the same routine creates a quiet understanding. Everyone is returning to the same cycle. The same rhythm. The same day. And somewhere beyond the village, the Nile continues its endless movement beside them all. A constant thread connecting every morning, every field, every home, every life. The sun is still not fully visible. But its arrival is no longer uncertain. It is coming. Slowly. Like everything else in this world. And in that slow arrival, ancient Egypt begins again. Not as something new. But as something familiar returning, exactly as it always has. As the first real light of morning finally spreads across ancient Egypt, it does not arrive as a sudden event. It arrives like something unfolding slowly, layer by layer, until the world is fully visible again. The sky is brighter now, but still gentle. Not sharp. Not overwhelming. Just steady light returning to familiar ground. Across the villages, life has already resumed its rhythm. Not in a rushed way. But in a way that feels like continuation, like the day was never truly broken apart, only paused for a while. Inside homes, the morning fire continues to glow softly. The heat is controlled, not strong. Enough to prepare food, enough to warm simple meals, enough to support the small routines that repeat every day without change. Grain is still being ground in some households. The motion is slow, circular, almost meditative. Press. Turn. Press again. The sound is familiar enough that no one really notices it anymore. It becomes part of the background of life, like the river, like the wind, like breathing. In other homes, bread is being shaped. not with precision meant for appearance, but with the simple intention of nourishment. Hands form dough gently, pressing it into shape based on memory more than instruction. Every household knows how it feels when it is right. There is no need to measure it beyond touch. Outside, the village has fully awakened now. People move along the same paths they have walked countless times before. The ground is dry, firm, and warming under the rising sun. Footsteps do not leave deep marks. The land is too familiar for that. It receives movement as something expected, something natural. In the fields near the Nile, irrigation work becomes more active again. Water channels are checked once more in the early light. Small adjustments are made where needed. A bit of soil placed here. A narrow opening cleared there. Water begins to move again through the channels, not in a rush, but in a controlled, steady flow. It does not spread randomly. It follows paths that have been shaped over long periods of time. People watch it carefully, not with urgency, but with quiet attention. Because water is not just part of farming. It is the structure that holds everything together. Farther out, farmers begin the next stage of their work. The soil is softer in some areas from previous flooding cycles. Drier in others. Each section of land requires slightly different care, but the approach remains the same: slow, steady movement, repeated actions, patient adjustment. Animals move through the fields alongside them. Cattle used for plowing walk in familiar lines, guided gently. Their movement is not forced. It is learned through repetition. The land, the animals, and the people all follow the same rhythm. Not because it is ordered, but because it has always been this way. In nearby workshops, craft work continues as the day becomes brighter. Pottery wheels turn again. Not quickly. Not with force. But in a steady rotation that allows clay to take shape naturally. The hands that guide it are experienced not through instruction, but through repetition across years. Each vessel formed is similar, but not identical. Small differences exist, shaped by moment, pressure, and mood. But all of them serve the same purpose: to hold, to store, to support daily life. Weaving continues in shaded areas. Strips of plant fiber are pulled and crossed again and again. The pattern builds slowly. Not visually complex in the moment, but deeply structured when finished. It is the kind of work that allows thought to drift. The body works. The mind rests. In the wider village, movement becomes more distributed as the morning advances. Some people carry goods to exchange. Some deliver materials between households. Some simply move between tasks that are part of their role in the community. There is no rush in these movements. Even when activity is many, it never feels chaotic. Everything flows through familiar paths. Like water through channels. Like time through days. The Nile remains constant in the background of all of this. Even when not directly visible, it is always present in awareness. It determines what is possible and what is not. Where life can gather. Where it cannot. And so, people do not resist it. They align with it. As midday slowly begins to approach again, the brightness increases. Shadows shorten. The warmth of the air grows stronger. And once more, the rhythm of the day begins its gentle shift towards slower movement. Not stopping. Not breaking. Only adjusting. Always adjusting. Because in ancient Egypt, life is not defined by sudden change. It is defined by repetition. By rhythm. By the steady continuation of small actions that form something much larger over time. And as this cycle continues, the day moves forward in the same quiet way it always has. Step by step. Moment by moment. Without urgency. Without interruption. Just life, flowing gently through time. As the sun climbs higher over ancient Egypt, the world begins to change its rhythm once again. Not abruptly. not noticeably in a single moment, but slowly, in a way that everyone feels more than sees. The light becomes stronger. The shadows beneath trees and walls grow shorter. The warmth in the air begins to settle more heavily over the land. This is the middle of the day. And in this middle, life does not stop. It simply becomes quieter in motion. In the fields near the Nile, work continues, but with a different feeling now. Earlier in the morning, movement was steady and active. Now it is more careful, more measured. People understand the heat without needing to speak about it. It is something that shapes behavior naturally. Tasks that require physical effort are either completed earlier or slowed down now. Irrigation checks still happen. Animals still need attention. But everything is done with less urgency, more patience. A farmer may pause more often while working the soil. Standing still for a moment under the rising sun, not thinking in words, but simply existing in the balance between effort and rest. The land itself feels heavier at this time of day. Not in a negative way, but in a way that asks for respect. And people respond to it without resistance. In villages, movement becomes noticeably softer. Paths that were active in the morning now see fewer footsteps. Those who do move do so under shaded roots whenever possible. Walls of mud brick provide narrow strips of shadow that feel important now. Small pockets of relief from the brightness. Inside homes, life becomes centered around stillness. Rooms that were active earlier now grow calm. The thick walls hold a cooler temperature inside compared to the outside heat. People naturally gather in these spaces. Not for gathering's sake, but for comfort, for balance, for rest. Some lie down on woven mats. Others sit quietly, leaning against walls or resting near doorways where air moves slightly more freely. There is no expectation to speak. Silence is not awkward here. It is normal. It is part of the day. Even breathing feels slower in this part of time. Food preparation becomes minimal during the peak heat. What has already been made in the morning is usually what is eaten now. Nothing elaborate is needed. Simple portions. Bread. Grain. Occasionally small additions depending on what is available. Eating itself becomes a quiet act. Not a social event. Just nourishment taken slowly, without distraction. Outside, the Nile continues its presence under the bright sun. Its surface reflects light so strongly that it becomes almost difficult to look at directly. Yet it never changes its pace. It does not respond to heat. It does not respond to human comfort or discomfort. It simply flows. Constant. Unchanging in rhythm. Along its banks, vegetation appears more still during this time. Leaves hang without movement unless touched by a passing breeze. Even animals reduce their activity. Some rest in shaded areas near water. Others stand quietly, conserving energy. Everything adjusts itself without instruction. This is how the land has always survived the height of the sun. In workshops and craft areas, activity is often reduced during the strongest heat. Pottery wheels may stop temporarily. Weaving slows. Woodworking pauses. Not because work is finished, but because timing matters. Effort is distributed across the day in a way that respects the environment. This is not seen as delay. It is seen as normal structure. In temples and administrative spaces, the atmosphere during midday is also quieter. Movement inside these structures is minimal. Records are checked slowly. Simple tasks are done without rush. The heavy stone architecture holds cooler air within, offering brief relief from the outside heat. People move through these spaces with calm awareness. Not hurried. Not distracted. Just steady. Outside again, the heat reaches its peak. And in this peak, the world feels almost suspended. Not inactive, but deeply still. Even sound feels softer at this time of day. It does not disappear. It simply loses sharpness. The land becomes a place of quiet endurance. And within that endurance, life continues in its simplest form. Rest. Recovery. Minimal movement. Steady breathing. This is not a break from life. It is part of life. A necessary phase in the daily cycle. Because in ancient Egypt, survival is not only about action. It is also about knowing when not to act. And so, the day holds its balance again. Between effort and rest. Between movement and stillness. Between sun and shade. And slowly, as always, time continues forward. As the intense heat of midday begins to loosen its hold, ancient Egypt slowly returns to movement again. It does not happen quickly. There is no single moment when everything changes. Instead, it begins as a quiet shift in the air. The brightness of the sun is still strong, but something about it feels less heavy than before. Shadows, which had become very small at midday, begin to stretch again. Even slightly at first. Almost unnoticeable. But enough for the body to recognize that change is coming. Inside homes, people begin to stir from rest. Not suddenly. Not with urgency. But in the same slow, natural way they woke in the morning. A hand moves. A body shifts. Eyes open again to the soft light filtering into rooms. The air feels slightly cooler than earlier, though still warm. It is enough to make movement feel possible again. Water is once more used to refresh the body. Not as ritual. Not as ceremony. But as a simple return to awareness. Hands, face, and sometimes feet are washed in slow, repeated motions. The feeling of cool water against skin becomes a quiet reminder that the day is continuing forward. Outside, the village begins to reawaken. Paths that were nearly empty during the peak heat now see movement again. At first, only a few people step out. Then more follow. And slowly, the village becomes active once more. Not fully energetic like the morning. But steady. Balanced. Alive again in a calmer form. Farmers begin to return to their fields for lighter tasks. Not heavy labor. But observation. Checking water levels in irrigation channels. Looking over crops. Adjusting small things that do not require strength, only attention. The Nile, always present, begins to reflect changing light again. The surface is less harsh than midday. Softer now. More readable. A place where sky and water meet in quiet reflection. Along its banks, people may gather again in small numbers. Not for work alone. But for presence. For shared space after hours of separation during rest. In workshops, activity resumes gradually. Pottery wheels begin turning again. Weaving returns to its slow rhythm. Woodwork continues in small, careful motions. The energy is not rushed. It is re-entering itself. Like a breath being taken after a long pause. The village does not feel divided between work and rest. It feels like a continuous flow that expands and contracts with the sun. As the afternoon continues, life becomes more connected again. People begin to interact more frequently. Not in large gatherings. But in simple encounters along paths and open spaces. A short exchange of words. A shared observation about the land. A brief moment of conversation while passing by. These interactions are not scheduled. They are natural. Part of living in a place where everyone's life is closely linked. Children also return more actively outside now. Their movement is lighter than adults, less tied to the demands of work. They walk through village spaces, observe activities, sometimes help in small ways, sometimes simply follow along with what others are doing. Learning continues through presence rather than instruction. Everything is seen. Everything is absorbed slowly over time. In homes, preparations for evening begin subtly. Not as a defined task. but as awareness of the day moving forward. Food that was stored earlier may be checked again. Water is refilled in containers. Spaces are tidied lightly. Not for appearance, but for comfort. The Nile continues to guide this entire rhythm. Its presence is not loud, but it is constant. It determines when people work, when they rest, when they gather, when they pause. Even when not directly thinking about it, life is shaped around it. As late afternoon approaches more clearly, the heat becomes softer again. Not gone, but no longer at its peak. The land feels more open to movement, more forgiving. And so, life expands again into activity. But always gently. Always within limits shaped by the natural world. This is the pattern that repeats every day. Not identical in detail, but identical in rhythm. A rhythm that does not need to be changed, because it already holds everything in balance. And as the light continues its slow descent toward evening, ancient Egypt moves forward with it. Step by step. Quietly. Steadily. Without interruption. As the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, ancient Egypt enters one of its most gentle and familiar transitions. The day does not end suddenly. It softens. Like light gradually losing strength rather than being taken away. The brightness that filled the land during midday is now quieter, more angled, more forgiving. Shadows stretch longer across the ground again, not sharp like morning, but soft and warm in tone. The entire landscape begins to feel less intense. More open. More calm. In the fields near the Nile, the final work of the day is simple and unhurried. Farmers complete small tasks that were left unfinished earlier. Nothing heavy. Nothing demanding. Just steady closing actions that bring the workday to a natural end. Tools are lifted one last time, then placed down carefully. Not abandoned. Not dropped. Placed with intention. Because even tools are part of daily rhythm, and they deserve the same sense of order that the day itself follows. Irrigation channels are checked briefly again. Water continues its slow movement through the earth, unaffected by the passing hours. It does not care about endings. It only continues. And that continuity gives structure to everything around it. As people begin to leave the fields, the return toward villages begins again. This return is not fast. It is not urgent. It is a slow merging of individuals moving along familiar paths. Some walk alone. Some walk in small groups. Their silhouettes stretch across the ground in the long evening light. Dust rises gently beneath their steps, then settles again without effort. The sound of movement is soft. Almost part of the wind. Inside the village, the atmosphere begins to change. Homes that were quiet during the afternoon now become active again. Not busy, but alive. Food preparation begins in a more noticeable way. Fire is kindled gently in clay hearths. Flames appear slowly, steady and controlled. The glow they produce feels warm against the cooling air. Bread may be warmed again. Simple meals prepared. Grain dishes shared in familiar portions. Eating in the evening is not rushed. It is not heavy. It is a moment of return. A gathering after separation during the day. Families come together more fully now. People sit closer to one another. Not out of necessity, but out of comfort. The day's distance between individuals begins to close. Conversations become more present in the evening. Not loud. Not many words. But steady exchanges. People speak about what they saw during the day. About water levels. About field conditions. About small changes in routine that are worth noting. Nothing dramatic. Just shared life. Children sit nearby, listening. Sometimes speaking. Sometimes simply watching the adults around them. They absorb the world in silence and sound equally. Outside, the Nile becomes one of the most peaceful sights of the day during this time. The light of sunset touches its surface in soft tones. Gold becomes muted. Orange becomes gentle. The river reflects everything without resistance. It does not choose what to show. It simply mirrors the sky as it is. Along its banks, stillness begins to return, but it is a different kind of stillness than the night. This one still carries warmth. It carries memory of movement. It feels like the world is slowly exhaling. In temples and structured spaces, the final activities of the day are completed. Offerings are organized. Spaces are cleaned. Records are finished. Everything is placed in order for the night ahead. The work here is quiet, deliberate, and consistent. There is no rush. Only completion. As evening deepens further, light begins to fade more noticeably. The sun moves closer to the edge of the horizon. Colors in the sky shift slowly. From bright to warm. From warm to soft. From soft to fading. Villages begin to settle into their nighttime rhythm. Animals are guided into resting areas. Paths grow quieter. Movement reduces gradually. There is no moment where everything stops. It simply slows until stillness becomes natural. Inside homes, lamps are prepared once more. Small oil flames are lit. They do not fill the space with brightness. They create small circles of light. Warm. Contained. Familiar. People sit within these spaces, letting the rest of the world become darker outside. Evening becomes the time of calm presence. Of shared quiet. Of reduced movement. The final stage of the day is not about action. It is about transition into rest. As night begins to approach again, ancient Egypt returns to its softer state. The rhythm never breaks. It only turns. Like water flowing through a channel that never changes direction. And as the last light of the sun disappears beyond the horizon, the world gently prepares once more for sleep. Not as an ending, but as continuation. Always continuation. Night returns again over ancient Egypt, not as something new, but as something familiar coming back into place. The sky darkens slowly, in layers. First, the warm colors of sunset fade. Then the last traces of light soften at the horizon. And finally, darkness settles evenly across the land, as if it has always been waiting there patiently. Villages grow quieter once more. Not suddenly. Not completely at once. But gradually, in the same way everything else in this world changes. Sounds become fewer. Movement becomes rare. And eventually, stillness takes over the landscape again. Inside homes, people prepare for sleep in the same calm rhythm that has shaped every part of their day. The oil lamps glow softly in small circles of light. Their flames do not flicker wildly. They remain steady, low, and controlled. Enough to see. Not enough to disturb the calm of night. Families gather close again. The closeness of evening returns, just as it did the night before, and the night before that. There is no need for many words at this time. Most communication has already been completed through the day. Now, only presence remains. People lie down slowly, adjusting their bodies in familiar positions. The ground beneath them is simple, steady, unchanged. Sleep does not come as a sudden force. It arrives gradually. Like a quiet wave moving inward. Outside, the Nile continues its endless motion. It does not pause for the night. It does not change its rhythm. It flows through darkness just as it flows through daylight, carrying the same silent purpose. Along its banks, the land rests again. Fields that were full of work during the day now lie still under the sky. Irrigation channels are quiet. Tools are resting in their places. Everything that moved now waits. Not with tension, but with acceptance. The night in ancient Egypt is not empty. It is full of continuation. Even in silence, life is still present. Just in a different form. In deeper stillness, some people may wake briefly during the night. Not out of alarm. Not out of disturbance. But as part of natural rhythm. A shift in position. A moment of awareness. Then sleep returns again without resistance. Time in these hours does not feel divided. It feels continuous. Unmarked. Flowing like the river itself. Far above, the stars remain constant. They do not move in ways the eye can easily perceive. They simply exist in their positions, forming a quiet pattern across the sky. They are not new. They are not temporary. They are part of the same cycle that has always existed. And beneath them, ancient Egypt rests. Not frozen. Not stopped. But held in balance. As the night continues deeper, everything settles into its lowest point of activity. The calm is not absence. It is completion. The day has passed through all its stages. Morning. Midday. Afternoon. Evening. And now night. Each one flowing into the next without interruption. Inside homes, breathing slows. Thoughts soften. Awareness fades gently. And sleep becomes complete across the land. The Nile continues. The stars continue. The cycle continues. And somewhere beyond the edge of night, even without being seen, morning already waits. Not urgently. Not loudly. Just waiting in its own quiet way to begin the same rhythm again. And so life in ancient Egypt does not end. It repeats. It flows. It remains. Always returning. Always continuing. Always steady. In ancient Egypt, life does not only move through hours of a day. It also moves through the slow breathing of the river itself. The Nile is not just a place in the landscape. It is a clock that moves across the entire year. Not with numbers. Not with urgency. But with rising and falling water, changing soil, and quiet shifts in what people must do to survive. And so, even daily life begins to feel different depending on the season. There is a time when the river rises. A time when it spreads across the land. And a time when it withdraws again, leaving behind rich soil and soft earth. Each phase changes the rhythm of every home, every field, every small routine. When the river begins to rise, the land near its banks slowly changes. Fields that were once dry paths begin to disappear underwater. Not suddenly, but gradually. Like the earth is remembering something old. During this time, farming becomes less about planting and more about waiting. People shift their attention away from the soil. Not with worry, but with understanding. Because this flooding is not destruction. It is preparation. Inside villages, daily life becomes slightly more centered on indoor activity. Tools are repaired more often during the season. Baskets are woven. Ropes are strengthened. Clay items are shaped in greater numbers, because there is more time to sit and work carefully. The world outside is changing shape, so the world inside becomes more important. Homes feel a little more active during these months, not because life is faster, but because work moves away from the fields. People sit in shaded rooms, working slowly with their hands. The rhythm of movement is steady. Nothing rushed. Nothing urgent. Just continuous preparation. When the flood reaches its fullest point, the river spreads across wide areas of land. What was once field becomes water and reflection. The entire landscape feels different, almost like a quiet inland sea. In this phase, travel changes slightly. Movement happens more by boat along the water than by walking across soil. Small wooden boats glide slowly across flooded areas. Not fast. Not busy. Just steady motion across expanded water. Villages remain calm. Life does not stop. It simply adjusts its direction. Children may watch the water more during this time. Not in excitement. but in quiet curiosity. Seeing how familiar paths have temporarily changed into waterways. This is normal. Expected. Part of the rhythm they grow up understanding without needing explanation. As the water slowly begins to retreat again, the land reappears in stages. First as shallow mud. Then as soft, dark soil. Then as fully usable earth again. This moment is one of the most important in the entire year. Because it prepares everything for planting. People return to the fields with a quiet sense of familiarity. The same land, but renewed. The same paths, but refreshed. Tools are brought out again. Not new tools. The same ones, used for generations, carefully maintained. The farming cycle begins again. Seeds are placed into the soil with steady motion. Not scattered wildly. But placed in a controlled, patient way. Step by step. Row by row. Field by field. This is not just work. It is alignment with the river. With the land. With time itself. Inside homes, life continues alongside these seasonal changes. Meals adjust slightly depending on what is available. Daily routines remain steady, even when the outside world changes shape. That is what makes Egyptian life feel so stable over long periods. It does not depend on constant change. It depends on repetition that adapts slowly to nature. Even temple and administrative life follows the seasonal rhythm. Records are kept not just for days, but for cycles. Understanding when floods came. How high the water rose. How the land responded afterward. Everything is observed quietly. Not in urgency, but in memory. And so, across the entire year, life in ancient Egypt is never separate from nature. It is not placed above it. It is not in conflict with it. It flows with it. Just as the Nile flows. Just as time flows. Just as daily life flows. And in that slow, repeating balance, everything remains stable. Not because it is simple, but because it is in rhythm with something larger than itself. In ancient Egypt, a house is not built to impress the eye. It is built to serve the rhythm of living. Simple. Close to the earth. Shaped by heat, by river soil, and by the long habit of daily survival. From the outside, most homes look similar. Flat roofs. Thick mud brick walls. Small, quiet openings that let in light without letting in too much heat. There is nothing sharp or decorative in the way we might expect later civilizations to build. Everything feels soft-edged, formed from material that came from the land itself. When you step inside, the first feeling is not complexity. It is stillness. The air is slightly cooler than outside, held gently by thick walls that remember the night longer than the sun. Light enters in narrow streams. Not enough to fully brighten everything. Just enough to reveal shape and direction. Inside, space is simple and organized in a way that is based on repetition rather than design. There is usually one main living area. This is where most of daily life happens. Eating. Resting. Small tasks done with the hands. Not separated into different rooms the way later homes might be. Everything happens in shared space, because life itself is shared. Along the edges of the room, storage areas hold grain, baskets, tools, and containers. Each object has a place. Not because of strict rules, but because repetition has made it natural. People remember where things belong the same way they remember how to walk familiar paths. Near one side, there may be a raised area or slightly separated corner used for sleeping. Simple mats or woven coverings are placed there. Nothing elaborate. Just soft surfaces that can be arranged and moved as needed. Sleep is not isolated from life. It is part of the same space where waking life happens. Food preparation also takes place inside or just outside the home depending on heat and season. A small clay hearth is often used. Fire is controlled carefully. Not large. Not dramatic. Just enough to cook grain, warm bread, or prepare simple meals. The smell of cooking is soft and familiar. It does not overwhelm the space. It blends into it. Water is stored in clay vessels. These vessels are placed carefully in shaded areas of the home. Their surfaces may feel slightly cool even during warm hours. They are used constantly throughout the day. For drinking. For washing. For small tasks that require clean water. Movement inside the home is slow and familiar. People do not rush through rooms. They flow through them. Every corner is known through repetition. Every object is understood through use. Children grow up inside this environment, learning not through instruction alone, but through observation. They see how grain is handled. How tools are placed. How fire is managed carefully. How water is carried without spilling. These actions become part of them over time. Not memorized, but absorbed. Sound inside the home is usually soft. The scrape of stone against grain. The movement of woven materials. Low conversation. Occasional silence that feels normal rather than empty. Even when multiple people are present, the space does not feel crowded in a harsh way. It feels shared. Balanced. In some homes, a small open courtyard may exist. This is where light enters more freely. Where air moves slightly more openly. Where certain tasks are done during cooler parts of the day. The courtyard is not separate from the home. It is part of its breathing space. At night, this same house transforms again. The light disappears. The interior becomes defined by oil lamps or simple flames. Shadows return softly to corners. People gather closer together. The same space that held daytime activity now holds rest. And yet it does not feel different. Only quieter. Everything in the house is designed around continuity. Not change. Not separation. But flow. And that reflects something deeper about life in ancient Egypt. Homes are not places away from life. They are life itself, contained in a stable form. A place where the same rhythm of work, rest, food, and sleep repeats every day. Gently. Quietly. Without interruption. In ancient Egypt, life is shared by the same river, the same sun, and the same rhythm of days. But not everyone lives the same way. The daily pattern of time is similar for all people: morning, work, rest, evening, sleep, but the shape of work changes depending on who you are. And so, within the same quiet civilization, different lives move side by side. Slowly. Without rushing past one another. A farmer's life begins with the land. Always the land. He wakes with the early light, before the heat grows strong. His world is soil, water, and the careful timing of the Nile. Most of his day is spent outside, where the air changes with the sun. His hands know the weight of tools. They know the texture of wet earth and dry soil. His work is not distant from nature. It is inside it. He does not observe the river from afar. He depends on it directly. Every action he takes is connected to whether water has come, whether soil is ready, whether the season is correct. There is no separation between life and environment. They are the same thing, experienced together. And nearby, another life moves differently. The life of a scribe. A scribe does not spend most of his time in fields. He spends it in quieter places. Shaded rooms. Temple spaces. Simple administrative areas where materials are kept and records are made. His tools are not farming tools. They are writing tools. A reed brush. A surface prepared for marks. His work is to observe and record. Grain amounts. Movements of goods. Details of events that others experience physically, but he captures in written form. His day is less shaped by physical labor and more by attention. By careful observation. by steady hands and repeated symbols. The sound around him is quieter than in the fields. Not silent, but controlled. Then there are builders. Their lives are shaped by stone, wood, and structure. They work in groups, often outdoors, sometimes near construction sites that slowly take shape over time. Their days involve lifting, placing, shaping, and adjusting materials. Heavy work, but still rhythmic. Repetitive. Predictable in its flow. They understand weight not as something sudden, but something managed through coordination. Their tools respond to force, balance, and timing. Like farming, but in a different form. Not soil, but structure. And then there are those connected to temples and religious spaces. Their daily rhythm is quieter in movement, but deeply structured in routine. They maintain spaces. They prepare offerings. They observe rituals that follow long-established patterns. Their work is not hurried. It is deliberate. Careful. Centered around order and repetition. Inside temple spaces, the atmosphere feels still even when people are moving. Stone walls hold coolness. Light enters in controlled ways. Sound is softened by structure. Everything feels measured. Across all these lives, farmer, scribe, builder, temple worker, the structure of the day remains similar. Morning begins slowly. Work continues through midday heat with adjustments. Afternoon brings gradual return. Evening brings gathering. Night brings rest. The difference is not in the rhythm, but in the environment where that rhythm unfolds. What ties all of these lives together is the Nile. Because whether someone writes on papyrus, shapes stone, or works soil, they all depend on the same river cycle. Its flooding. Its retreat. Its predictability. It is not just water. It is timing. It is structure. It is the reason daily life can remain stable across generations. And so, even though ancient Egypt holds many different kinds of work, it does not feel fragmented. It feels connected. Like different paths moving through the same landscape. All returning to the same quiet pattern of morning, work, rest, and night. And in that pattern, life continues. Not in haste, but in rhythm. Always in rhythm. In ancient Egypt, food is not something that feels separate from life. It is woven into it. Quietly. Every day. In the same steady way the river moves beside the land. What people eat is shaped by the Nile, by the soil, and by the slow rhythm of seasons that repeat without sudden change. There is no sense of abundance that comes and goes quickly. There is instead a steady familiarity. The same kinds of food returning again and again in different forms, prepared with the same careful repetition. Bread is at the center of almost every meal. It begins with grain. Grain that comes from the fields along the river. Collected after long months of growth shaped by water, soil, and sun. The grain is stored carefully in homes and storage spaces, protected from heat and time as best as possible. When it is needed, it is brought out in measured amounts. Not rushed. Not wasted. Stone tools are used to grind it slowly into flour. The motion is steady. Repetitive. Almost calming in its rhythm. Press. Turn. Press again. The sound is low and consistent, blending into the quiet background of daily life. Once the flour is ready, it is mixed with water. Sometimes with a small addition of salt or simple ingredients depending on availability. The dough is shaped by hand. Not with precision for appearance, but with familiarity from repetition. People know how it should feel. Soft. Balanced. Ready. Then it is placed into simple clay ovens or heated surfaces. The fire is controlled carefully. Not large. Not dramatic. Just enough to transform raw mixture into bread that will last through the day. When it is ready, the smell is warm and earthy. It spreads gently through homes and courtyards. Not overwhelming. Just present. A quiet signal that food is ready. Alongside bread, other simple foods appear in daily meals. Vegetables grown near the river. Onions. Garlic. Lentils in some seasons. Occasionally fish from the Nile, prepared in simple ways depending on availability. Nothing is overly complex. Meals are not designed for variety in the modern sense. They are designed for consistency. For survival. For balance. Food is eaten slowly. Not as a rushed activity, but as part of the day's rhythm. People sit together or nearby, sharing what is available. Conversation may be light or absent. Both feel natural. There is no need for excess during eating. Only enough to continue the day. Water is stored in clay vessels and used throughout meals. It is simple. Direct. Always present. In larger households or settlements, food preparation becomes slightly more structured, but still remains based on the same principles. Grain is stored in larger quantities. Bread is baked in larger batches. Distribution is organized quietly within families or communities. Nothing feels chaotic. Everything follows a pattern built over generations. Even when people travel or work in fields away from home, food remains consistent. Simple provisions are carried. Bread. Dried foods. Water. Enough to maintain energy through the working hours. The Nile plays a silent role in all of this. It does not directly place food on tables, but it makes food possible. By shaping the soil. By allowing crops to grow. By defining the cycle of planting and harvest that repeats every year. Without it, nothing would be stable. With it, everything becomes predictable. And predictability in food means stability in life. There is no constant searching. No uncertainty in daily meals. Only repetition. And within that repetition, a kind of quiet comfort forms. Even eating becomes part of the larger rhythm of existence. Morning food prepares the body for work. Midday food restores energy during heat. Evening food closes the day gently. Each meal fitting naturally into the cycle of light and darkness. As days pass, this pattern does not change. It deepens. Becomes familiar. Almost invisible in its consistency. And that is what defines food in ancient Egypt. Not variety. Not luxury. But continuity. A steady presence that supports every other part of life. And so, from grain to bread, from river to table, from field to home, life continues in the same quiet rhythm. Simple. Repeating. Endless in its calm flow. In ancient Egypt, life moves slowly enough that the mind has time to settle. There are no sudden changes in the rhythm of the day. No sharp interruptions that pull attention from one place to another. Instead, everything unfolds in a steady pattern: morning light, gradual work, midday stillness, evening calm, and night rest. Within this rhythm, emotions do not rise and fall quickly. They move gently. Like the Nile itself. People wake without urgency. Their thoughts do not rush ahead of them. There is no need to plan beyond what the day already holds. Most of what will happen is already known. Fields will be tended. Water will be carried. Food will be prepared. Rest will come when the heat grows strong. And sleep will return when darkness settles again. Because of this predictability, the mind does not need to hold tension for what might happen next. It rests within what is already understood. This does not mean life is without difficulty. The land can be harsh. The sun can be strong. The river can rise higher or lower than expected. But even these changes are part of a larger pattern that people have lived with for generations. They are not surprises. They are variations within something familiar. And so, the emotional life of ancient Egyptians is shaped not by constant uncertainty, but by steady awareness. Feelings are present, but they do not dominate the mind. A person working in the fields may feel the weight of the sun, the strain in their arms, the dryness in their throat. But these sensations are accepted as part of the day. They are not resisted. They are moved through. In the cooler hours, when work becomes lighter or pauses, the mind also becomes lighter. There is space for quiet observation. For simply sitting and looking at the river. Or watching shadows move along the ground. Or listening to the soft sounds of a village returning to life after rest. These moments are not considered special. They are part of the natural flow of time. And because they happen every day, they shape the inner world slowly. Children grow up within this rhythm. They learn not only how to work, but how to be still. How to wait. How to observe without needing to act. Their understanding of time is not divided into strict measurements. It is felt through the movement of light and shadow. Through the warmth of the day and the coolness of night. Through repetition rather than counting. This shapes their thoughts as they grow older. Life is not seen as something that must be controlled. It is something to move within. Even conversation reflects this calm mindset. Words are not used quickly. People do not speak just to fill silence. Silence itself is comfortable. It does not create tension. It allows the mind to rest between thoughts. When people do speak, it is often about things that are directly experienced. The condition of the land. The level of the river. The tasks of the day. There is little need for distant concerns. The present holds enough. In the evening, when families gather, there is a different kind of emotional tone. Softer. More reflective. The body is tired, but not overwhelmed. The mind slows down naturally. Stories may be shared, but they are not told with excitement. They are told steadily. With pauses. With repetition. As if the act of telling is more important than the content itself. These stories connect people to memory. To past seasons. To experiences that are not separate from the present, but part of the same long flow. As night deepens, the mind prepares for rest again. Thoughts become less defined. Less structured. They drift more easily. Sleep arrives not as something forced, but as something allowed. Dreams may come, though they are not always remembered or spoken about. For many, sleep is simply a quiet return inward. A pause that prepares the body and mind for the next day. In ancient Egypt, there is no sharp boundary between inner life and outer life. They move together. The rhythm of the land becomes the rhythm of thought. The flow of the river becomes the flow of feeling. And because everything repeats in a steady, predictable way, the mind does not need to struggle against time. It moves with it. Slowly. Gently. Without resistance. This is what creates the calm that rests beneath daily life. Not the absence of effort, but the presence of rhythm. A rhythm that holds both body and mind in balance. And within that balance, life continues quietly, day after day, without needing to become anything more than what it already is. As evening fades and night settles fully across ancient Egypt, the world becomes softer in a way that is difficult to describe with sharp edges. It is not simply darker. It is quieter in feeling. The shapes of things remain, but they lose their clarity. Walls become gentle outlines. Paths dissolve into shadow. The Nile continues to move, but its surface no longer reflects the sky in bright detail. It becomes a presence rather than a sight. Inside the homes, the final moments of wakefulness pass slowly. There is no fixed point where the day ends. No sudden closing of activity. Instead, everything reduces in layers. Voices become fewer. Movements become smaller. Even thoughts begin to slow, as if they are following the same rhythm as the body. Oil lamps burn low. Their light is steady, not bright. It touches only a small part of the room, leaving the rest in quiet shadow. People sit or lie down close to one another. There is comfort in proximity, in shared stillness. Nothing more needs to be said. The day has already been lived. Sleep begins in this calm environment, without resistance. There is no struggle to fall asleep, no effort to force rest. The body simply allows itself to drift. Breathing slows. Muscles release tension. The mind becomes less focused, less structured. Thoughts no longer move in clear lines. They begin to loosen, to fade into something softer. Outside, the land is nearly silent. Not completely silent, but close. The small sounds that remain feel distant and gentle. An insect moving in the dark. A faint shift of wind through leaves. The quiet, continuous flow of the Nile. These sounds do not interrupt sleep. They support it. They create a steady background that does not change suddenly. And because of this, the mind does not need to stay alert. It can rest. As sleep deepens, dreams may come. Not always vivid. Not always remembered. But present in soft, shifting forms. Images may appear without clear structure. Fragments of the day. The feeling of water. The movement of walking. The warmth of the sun. These are not separate from waking life. They are reflections of it. Gentle echoes of the same experiences, rearranged without effort. There is no urgency in dreams. No need to understand them. They pass like everything else quietly. Some people may wake briefly during the night. A small movement. A change in position. A moment of awareness. But there is no alarm in these awakenings. No sudden tension. The world outside remains still. The home remains familiar. And so, sleep returns again just as easily as it left. Time during the night does not feel divided into parts. There are no clear segments. Only a continuous stretch of darkness that holds everything in calm suspension. The deepest part of the night feels almost timeless. As if the world has paused, not stopped, but simply slowed to its quietest state. The Nile continues its steady movement through this darkness. Unseen, but always present. Its rhythm does not change. It does not respond to night or day. It remains constant, and in that constancy, it shapes the sense of time itself. Above, the sky is filled with stars. They do not flicker in a dramatic way. They remain steady. Small points of light that do not move quickly enough to be noticed. They exist without drawing attention. And beneath them, ancient Egypt rests. Not in emptiness, but in balance. Every home, every field, every quiet path, all held within the same stillness. This stillness is not something people try to create. It is something they live within. It is part of the land, part of the river, part of the cycle that repeats every day without interruption. As the night continues, sleep deepens again across the land. Breathing becomes slower, more regular. The body fully at rest. The mind fully quiet. And somewhere beyond the darkness, though no one is yet aware of it, the first hint of morning begins to form again. Not visible. Not felt yet. But present. Waiting. Just as it always does. And in this way, night in ancient Egypt is never an ending. It is a passage. A gentle transition that carries everything forward into another day. Slowly. Quietly. Without ever breaking the rhythm that holds life together. Night rests softly over ancient Egypt. Everything has settled into its deepest calm. The homes are still. The fields are silent. The paths that once carried footsteps now hold only memory. And through it all, the Nile continues its slow, endless movement, unseen in the darkness but never absent. This is the quietest moment of the entire cycle. A moment that feels almost suspended. As if time itself has slowed to its gentlest pace. Inside the homes, sleep is complete. Breathing is steady. Even. soft. There is no effort left in the body. No task waiting to be done. No thought needing to be followed. Only rest. Deep and undisturbed. The night air moves lightly across the land. It touches the walls of homes, the surface of the river, the open spaces between fields. It does not rush. It does not change direction suddenly. It simply passes, as everything does here slowly, without resistance. Above, the stars remain. Quiet. Constant. Unmoving to the eye. They do not call attention to themselves. They simply exist, watching over a land that has already given itself fully to rest. Time continues to pass, though it is not measured. Not counted. It flows in the same way the river flows. Unbroken. Unhurried. And then, without any clear beginning, something begins to change. Not in the land. Not in the homes. But in the sky. A faint light begins to form at the farthest edge of the horizon. So soft that it is almost not there. So quiet that it does not disturb the darkness. This is how the day returns. Not as an arrival, but as a gentle reappearance. The darkness does not disappear. It fades. Slowly. Making space without resistance. The stars begin to soften in the growing light. Not vanishing all at once, but becoming less visible, as if stepping back quietly. The Nile reflects this change before anything else. A faint line of light stretches across its surface. Thin. Delicate. Moving with the water. It does not shine brightly. It glows softly. And that is enough. Inside the homes, sleep begins to loosen its hold. Not completely. Not suddenly. But gently. A small movement. A shift in breath. A quiet return of awareness that does not yet become thought. The body begins to remember the day. Not consciously. But through feeling. Through habit. Through the same rhythm that has guided every day before. Outside, the land becomes visible again in slow stages. Shapes return. Edges soften into form. The paths, the walls, the trees, the fields, everything reappears as if it had never truly left. Nothing is new. Everything is familiar. And that familiarity is what makes the return so calm. The first true light of morning spreads across the land. Not quickly. Not forcefully. Just enough to awaken the world again. The air is cool. Clean. Still holding the quiet of night, even as the day begins to form. And within this moment, ancient Egypt begins again. Not as a beginning, but as a continuation. The same homes. The same river. The same people. The same slow rhythm of living. Everything returns to movement in its own time. A hand reaches for water. A body rises from rest. A door opens quietly to the morning air. And outside, the Nile flows beside it all. Unchanged. Steady. Endless. The cycle has not ended. It has simply turned. Like water following its path. Like light returning to the sky. Like breath moving in and out without effort. And so, life continues. Not with urgency. Not with noise. But with a calm that remains constant beneath every moment. Morning will grow into day. Day will soften into evening. Evening will fade into night. And night will return again to the same quiet stillness. Over and over. Without interruption. Without needing to change. And as this rhythm continues, ancient Egypt remains what it has always been. A place where life flows gently through time. Where nothing is rushed. Where nothing is forced. Where everything moves in quiet balance. And slowly, as the light grows stronger and the world awakens once more, the story does not end. It simply continues. Softly. Endlessly. Like the river. Like the day. like the quiet breath of life itself. Morning in ancient Egypt does not begin with a clear line. It grows quietly. The light that first appeared as a faint glow now spreads across the land with gentle certainty. The sky becomes wider, brighter, still soft, but no longer hidden. The coolness of night lingers for a little while longer, resting in the air like a memory that has not yet fully left. Inside the homes, people rise in their own time. There is no signal that calls everyone at once. No shared moment of beginning. Only individual movement that slowly gathers into a shared rhythm. A person sits up, feeling the stillness of the room. Another reaches for a clay vessel, pouring water into their hands. Someone else steps quietly toward the doorway, letting the first air of morning touch their face. These actions are small, almost invisible, but they are the true beginning of the day. Outside, the village becomes visible in layers. First the shapes, then the paths, then the people moving along them. Each movement is unhurried. Each step is familiar. Nothing surprises the morning. It simply receives what has always been there. The Nile reflects the growing light more clearly now. Its surface holds the sky in soft motion. A gentle blending of water and brightness that never fully separates. The river does not announce the day, but it carries it forward, just as it carries everything else. In the early hours, before the sun becomes strong, there is a quiet sense of openness in the land. The air feels light. The ground is still cool beneath bare feet. This is the time when movement feels easiest. When the body responds without resistance. And so, people begin their work again. Not as something new, but as something remembered. Farmers walk toward their fields with steady steps. Tools are carried without thought. They do not need to prepare themselves mentally. The work is already part of them. In the fields, the soil waits. Dark in some places, dry in others. Each section understood through experience rather than measurement. Water channels are checked again. Small adjustments are made. The movement is careful, patient. Nothing is forced. Because the land responds best to steady hands. Nearby, animals move through their own morning routine. Goats step lightly along familiar paths. Birds begin their scattered sounds, soft at first, then more present as the light grows. These sounds do not interrupt the quiet. They become part of it. In the village, other forms of work begin to take shape. Fires are prepared again. Grain is brought out. The slow rhythm of grinding returns, just as it did the day before. Stone against grain. A sound that does not change. A sound that has always existed here. Food preparation follows the same gentle pattern. Dough is shaped. Bread is warmed. Simple meals are created without variation. Not because there is no imagination, but because consistency brings stability. And stability brings calm. Children begin to move through the spaces of the village again. Their steps are lighter. Their awareness more open. They observe everything without needing to question it. This is how they learn. Through repetition. Through presence. Through simply being part of the rhythm that surrounds them. In shaded areas, craft work begins again. Hands return to clay. To fiber. To wood. Each material responds to touch in a familiar way. Each task continues from where it left off. Nothing feels interrupted. Because nothing truly stops. As the sun rises higher, the light becomes stronger. Shadows shorten. The warmth begins to build again. Slowly. Steadily. Just as it always does. And within this growing light, the entire land settles into its daily movement once more. The same pattern. The same flow. The same quiet balance between effort and rest. There is no need to think about what comes next. It is already known. The day will continue. The heat will rise. Work will slow. Rest will come. Evening will return. Night will follow. And then, morning again. This is not a cycle that needs to be completed. It does not lead to an ending. It simply continues. Without urgency. Without change. Like the river beside it. Flowing. Endless. Calm. And as the sun continues to rise over ancient Egypt, the world does not feel like it has begun something new. It feels like it has gently stepped back into something that has always been there. Something steady. Something quiet. Something that never truly leaves. And so, the day unfolds again. Slowly. Softly. Without end. The morning continues to open across ancient Egypt, not in a rush, but in a steady widening of light. The early coolness begins to fade. Not suddenly. Just a quiet warming of the air, felt first on the skin, then in the breath, then in the slow shift of how the body moves. The sun climbs higher. Its light becomes more direct. Shadows that stretched long across the ground now begin to shorten again. Everything follows this change without resistance. In the fields, work continues in calm repetition. Hands move through familiar motions. Soil is turned. Water is guided. Plants are checked with quiet attention. Nothing feels uncertain. Each action has already been done many times before. Each movement belongs to memory. The land receives this work without struggle. It responds in its own time. Always slowly. Always steadily. Farmers pause from time to time, not because they are tired in a sudden way, but because the rhythm of work naturally includes stillness. A moment of standing. A breath taken without effort. Eyes looking across the fields, not searching, just observing. These pauses are not interruptions. They are part of the work itself. Nearby, the Nile continues its endless motion. Its surface reflects the strengthening light, becoming brighter, more intense as the sun rises. But even this brightness does not feel harsh at first. It grows into itself, just as the day does. In the village, daily tasks continue with the same quiet consistency. Grinding of grain continues in steady circles. The sound is soft, low, and familiar. It does not demand attention. It blends into the background of life. Water is carried from storage vessels, poured slowly, used carefully. Every drop is understood as part of something larger. Something that connects the home to the river beyond. Craft work continues as well. Hands move across materials that respond in known ways. Clay bends and shapes. Fibers cross and tighten. Wood is handled with care. Each object being made serves a purpose that will return again and again in daily life. Nothing is made without meaning. Nothing is made without use. As the morning moves closer to midday, the light becomes stronger. The warmth settles more firmly over the land. The air feels heavier, not in a way that resists, but in a way that asks for slower movement. And people respond. Not with effort, but with adjustment. Steps become slightly slower. Tasks become more measured. Energy is conserved without needing to think about it. This is how life stays in balance. Children, who moved more freely in the early morning, now begin to slow as well. They stay closer to shaded areas. Their movements become quieter, guided not by instruction, but by feeling. Even animals adjust in the same way. They seek shade. They move less. They rest where they can. Everything aligns with the rising heat. Nothing fights against it. Inside homes, the cooler interior spaces begin to draw people back in. The thick walls offer relief. The air inside feels calmer, protected from the full strength of the sun. People move between inside and outside, following comfort rather than strict routine. There is no fixed boundary. Only a gentle awareness of where the body feels at ease. Food that was prepared earlier continues to be used. Small portions are eaten. Not heavy meals. Just enough to maintain strength. Eating remains quiet. Unhurried. A continuation of the same steady rhythm. As midday approaches, the brightness of the world reaches its height. The sky is clear. The light is direct. Shadows are minimal. Everything feels exposed to the sun. And in this exposure, life does not push forward. It softens. It slows. It becomes more inward. The pace of work decreases naturally. Not because it must stop, but because it changes form. Effort becomes lighter. Movement becomes smaller. Stillness begins to return in small layers. The land itself feels quieter again. Not silent, but less active. The sounds of the morning begin to fade into a softer background. And so, without any clear signal, the day enters its middle once more. Not as a peak, but as a gentle pause within the larger flow. A moment where everything rests within itself. Where nothing needs to be rushed. Where time stretches quietly across the land. And in that quiet stretch, ancient Egypt continues to live exactly as it always has. Step by step. Breath by breath. In calm, unbroken rhythm. By the time the sun reaches its highest place above ancient Egypt, the world has already begun to quiet itself. Not through command. Not through decision. But through a slow and natural understanding shared by everything that lives on the land. The light is now full and direct. It rests over the fields, the villages, and the wide surface of the Nile without interruption. There are no long shadows anymore. Only short, soft shapes beneath objects, close to the ground. The air feels heavier. Not in a harsh way, but in a way that gently asks the body to slow. And so, it does. In the fields, movement becomes minimal. Farmers who were working steadily in the morning now reduce their actions to only what is necessary. A final check of water channels. A small adjustment to soil. A quiet glance across the crops. Nothing more. There is no need to continue heavy effort under this strong light. The land will wait. It always waits. And so do the people. They begin to move away from open spaces, step by step, toward shade. Toward shelter. Toward stillness. The village paths grow quieter again. Footsteps that once moved steadily now become fewer. The dust settles and remains undisturbed. Even the air seems to hold itself gently in place. Inside the homes, the difference is felt immediately. The thick mud brick walls hold a softer temperature. The light that enters is filtered and calm. People settle into these spaces naturally. Not because they are told to, but because it is where the body finds ease. Some lie down on woven mats. Others sit with their backs against the walls, letting their weight rest fully. Eyes may close. Not always in deep sleep, but in a kind of quiet pause. A resting of the senses. Breathing becomes slower. More even. The mind, like the body, reduces its movement. Thoughts do not disappear. But they soften. They become less defined, less urgent. They drift, like the slow movement of air through a shaded room. There is no need to hold onto them. They pass without effort. In this part of the day, silence becomes deeper. Not empty, but full in a different way. The absence of constant motion reveals the small, steady sounds that remain. A faint shifting of fabric. The quiet presence of breath. Perhaps the distant movement of the Nile, too far to hear clearly, but always felt. Even animals follow this rhythm. They rest in shaded areas. They lower their movement to the simplest level. Nothing wastes energy. Everything conserves. The land itself appears still. Plants do not move unless touched by a passing breeze. The surface of the river reflects the bright sky without change. It becomes almost mirror-like in its calmness. And in this stillness, time feels different. It stretches. It slows. It becomes something that is experienced rather than measured. There are no markers dividing one moment from the next. Only a continuous presence of now. Inside this quiet, people do not feel the need to act. There is no pressure to fill the time. Rest is not seen as separate from life. It is part of life. As necessary as work. As natural as breathing. Some may drift into light sleep. A short, gentle rest that does not fully separate them from awareness. Others remain awake, but in a state that feels close to sleep. Thoughts are soft. The body is still. Everything is calm. This is the deepest pause of the day. Not an interruption, but a balance. A moment where effort and stillness meet in equal measure. And just as the morning slowly became day, this stillness will slowly begin to change again. Not yet. Not suddenly. But gradually. The light will begin to shift. The heat will begin to soften. Movement will return. But for now, nothing needs to happen. The world rests exactly as it is. Complete. Balanced. Quiet. And in that quiet, ancient Egypt holds itself gently within the rhythm that never breaks. After the deepest quiet of midday, nothing changes all at once. There is no clear signal. No sudden shift that announces the return of movement. Instead, the world begins to loosen its stillness in the smallest possible ways. The sun is still high, but its presence feels slightly different. The light remains bright, yet the weight of it begins to soften. Not enough to be noticed quickly. Only enough to be felt by the body. Inside the homes, people begin to stir again. A hand moves slightly. A shoulder shifts. Eyes open, not fully alert, but gently aware. The rest of midday does not end. It fades. Slowly giving space for movement to return. Breathing becomes a little deeper. The body, which had settled fully into rest, begins to gather itself again. There is no urgency to stand. No need to move immediately. Just a quiet awareness that the day is continuing. Some sit up slowly, allowing the world to come back into focus. The room looks the same. The light has changed only slightly. But the feeling is different. More open. More ready. Water is reached for again. Hands are dipped. Faces are cooled. The simple act of touching water becomes a gentle bridge between rest and activity. Outside, the village begins to shift in the same quiet way. At first, only a few people step out into the light. Their movements are slow. Measured. As if testing the air. The ground is still warm beneath their feet. But it no longer holds the same intensity as before. That is enough. More people follow. Not together. Not as a group. But one by one. The paths begin to see footsteps again. Soft at first. Then gradually more frequent. Still not busy. Just alive again. In the fields, farmers return carefully. Not to begin heavy work. But to observe. To reconnect with the land after the long pause. They walk along the edges of their fields. Looking at soil. Checking water levels. Touching plants lightly. Everything is done with attention, not effort. The land responds quietly, just as it did in the morning. The Nile reflects the changing light once more. Its surface is no longer harsh. The brightness softens, allowing shapes and movement to become visible again. Water flows as it always has. Unchanged. Steady. In the village, small tasks resume. Not all at once. But gradually. A tool is picked up. A piece of work continues from where it paused. Clay is shaped again. Fibers are woven again. Each action reconnects with what was left earlier. Nothing is restarted. Everything is continued. Children step outside more freely now. Their movement returns with lightness. They walk through the village spaces, observing, sometimes helping, sometimes simply being present. Their energy is gentle, shaped by the same rhythm that guides everything around them. Conversations begin to appear again in small moments. A few words exchanged while passing. A quiet observation shared between neighbors. Nothing loud. Nothing extended. Just enough to reconnect. The air begins to feel more open as the afternoon slowly approaches. A faint breeze may move through the spaces between homes. Not strong, but noticeable. It carries with it a sense of change. A signal that the day is moving forward again. Inside homes, people begin to prepare for the later part of the day. Small tasks are completed. Spaces are adjusted. Nothing major. Only what is needed. Everything is done with the same steady attention that has shaped the entire day. As time continues, the light slowly shifts. Almost unnoticeably. Shadows begin to stretch again. First very slightly. Then more clearly. The sun is still high, but it is no longer at its peak. This is how the afternoon begins. Not as a new phase, but as a continuation of the same gentle rhythm. Movement returns, but it remains calm. Energy increases, but it stays controlled. Nothing becomes rushed. Nothing becomes overwhelming. The balance between action and rest remains. Just as it always has. And so, ancient Egypt moves forward again. Not quickly. Not dramatically. But step by step. Through quiet adjustments. Through small movements. Through the same steady flow that never breaks. The day continues. Softly. Calmly. Exactly as it was meant to. As the afternoon settles more fully across ancient Egypt, the light begins to change in a way that feels almost comforting. It is no longer sharp. No longer pressing down with the same quiet weight as midday. Instead, it becomes softer. Warmer in tone. More forgiving to the eyes, to the skin, to the movement of the body. Shadows stretch a little farther now. Not long yet. But enough to create contrast again. Enough to give shape to the ground, to the walls, to the paths that went through the village. This change is small, but it is deeply felt. And with it, life expands once more. In the fields, farmers move with a steadier rhythm again. Not the early energy of morning. Not the stillness of midday. But something balanced between the two. They walk across the land with quiet familiarity. Their steps are measured. Their hands return to gentle tasks. Checking soil. Adjusting small channels of water. Clearing what needs to be cleared. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is heavy. The land feels more open now. More willing to receive movement again. The Nile reflects the afternoon sky with a calm, softened brightness. Its surface carries light in a way that feels gentle, almost warm. Along its edges, the world feels peaceful. Not empty, but calm in its presence. Some people find themselves near the water again. Not always for work. Sometimes simply to stand, to look, to exist beside something that has never changed. The river does not speak. But it holds attention without asking for it. In the village, activity becomes more visible again. Paths that were quiet during midday now hold steady movement. People pass one another in familiar ways. A nod. A brief word. A shared glance that carries understanding without needing explanation. These interactions are simple. But they hold the feeling of connection. Of lives moving side by side within the same rhythm. Children move more freely now. Their steps lighter. Their curiosity returning with the softer air. They walk between spaces, watching the adults, sometimes helping, sometimes simply being part of the environment. Learning continues without instruction. Through presence. Through repetition. Through quiet observation. Inside homes, preparations begin to take a slightly different shape. The awareness of evening starts to form. Not as a plan, but as a feeling. A gentle sense that the day is beginning to close. Food is checked again. Water is refreshed. Spaces are adjusted in small ways. Everything moves toward comfort. Toward gathering. Toward rest. Craft work continues, but it begins to slow. Not stopping yet, but easing. Hands move a little more gently. Tasks are brought toward completion. Nothing is left unfinished in a rushed way. Everything is brought to a natural pause. The air itself begins to change. A faint coolness returns, carried softly through open spaces. It is not strong, but it is noticeable. A quiet relief after the long warmth of the day. Even animals respond. They move more. They shift from resting places. They follow familiar paths back toward where they will settle for the night. The entire environment feels like it is gently turning inward. Not closing, but softening. Returning to itself. As the sun lowers further, the colors of the land begin to shift. The brightness fades slightly. Warm tones begin to appear. The light touches surfaces differently now. More softly. More slowly. Everything looks the same, yet feels different. Calmer. Deeper. More complete. In this time, people often find themselves closer together again. Not through gathering in a formal sense, but through natural movement toward shared spaces. The distance created by the day's work begins to close. Voices may be heard a little more often now. Still quiet. Still measured. But present. The feeling of community becomes more visible in these small moments. A shared path. A shared task. A shared pause near the river. These are not events. They are simply life, unfolding in its steady way. As the afternoon continues to soften, the transition toward evening becomes more certain. Not marked by a clear line, but felt in the air, in the light, in the slowing of movement. And through it all, the Nile continues. Unchanged. Flowing beside every moment, every action, every quiet breath of life. It does not begin. It does not end. It simply carries the rhythm forward. And so, ancient Egypt moves gently toward evening once again. Not rushing. Not resisting. But following the same calm path it has always known. Step by step. Light by light. Into the quiet warmth of what comes next. As the sun lowers further across ancient Egypt, the world begins to soften in a deeper, more noticeable way. The light no longer spreads evenly. It comes at an angle now. Touching the land gently, as if it is beginning to withdraw. The brightness fades, not suddenly, but slowly, like a long breath being released. Shadows stretch across the ground. Long and quiet. They move across the fields, across the walls of homes, across the paths where people walk. Everything becomes more defined in shape, yet softer in feeling. The heat of the day continues to ease. The air carries a faint coolness that was not present before. It moves lightly between buildings, across open spaces, and along the edge of the river. This change is subtle, but it is enough to shift the pace of life once more. In the fields, the final tasks of the day are completed. Farmers move with a calm sense of closure. Not rushing to finish, but gently bringing their work to a natural end. Tools are lifted one last time. Soil is checked once more. Water is observed in its channels. Everything is left in a state that will be ready for tomorrow. Nothing is forced. Nothing is left in disorder. There is a quiet respect in the way work ends. A sense that each day is part of something ongoing, not something separate. As people begin to leave the fields, their movement turns toward home. The paths fill slowly with returning figures. Their steps are steady, unhurried, carrying the quiet weight of a day that has been fully lived. Dust rises gently beneath their feet, then settles again. Nothing lingers. Nothing resists. In the village, life begins to gather inward. Homes that were open during the day now become the center of activity again. Fires are prepared in clay hearths. Flames appear slowly, casting warm, soft light. The smell of food returns, simple and familiar. Bread warmed again. Grain dishes prepared. Meals do not feel separate from the day. They feel like its final gentle layer. People sit together more closely now. The distance created by work fades. There is no need for large gatherings. Even small groups feel complete. Conversation becomes slightly more present. Still quiet. Still measured. Words are shared about the day. About small observations. About what will be done tomorrow. Nothing dramatic. Nothing urgent. Just the steady exchange of life. Children sit nearby. Sometimes listening. Sometimes speaking softly. Their energy has softened with the day. Their movements are slower. Their attention calmer. They remain close to the rhythm without needing to understand it fully. Outside, the Nile reflects the sky in changing colors. The brightness of afternoon fades into warmer tones. Soft gold. Muted orange. Gentle shades that move across the surface of the water without sharp edges. The river does not hold these colors. It carries them, letting them pass as everything else passes. Along its banks, stillness begins to return. Not complete stillness, but a quiet reduction in movement. The world begins to exhale. As the sun approaches the horizon, the light becomes even softer. Edges blur. Details fade slightly. Everything feels more distant, even when it is close. This is the transition into evening. Not a moment, but a slow shift. Inside homes, preparations for night begin in small, quiet ways. Spaces are adjusted. Water is placed within reach. Simple tasks are completed without thought. Everything is done with familiarity. With ease. With repetition. Animals are guided to their resting places. Their movement is calm. They follow paths they already know. Nothing needs to be forced. The entire environment moves together toward rest. As the sun touches the edge of the horizon, its light becomes thin. Soft. Almost fragile. And then, slowly, it begins to disappear. Not suddenly. Not completely at once. But gently, like everything else in this land. The sky changes color again. From warm tones to deeper shades. From light to shadow. From day into night. And in this quiet descent, ancient Egypt prepares itself once more for rest. Not as an ending, but as a return. A return to stillness. To silence. To the gentle rhythm that never breaks. The day has passed. But it has not ended. It has only turned. And the night, already waiting, begins to take its place. Softly. Calmly. Without interruption. As the last light of the sun fades beyond the horizon, ancient Egypt slips gently into night once more. There is no sudden darkness. No sharp dividing line. Only a slow dimming of the world, as if the light is being folded away with care. The sky deepens in color. From soft gold to muted blue. From blue to a deeper shade that holds the first quiet hints of night. Shapes begin to soften again. Details fade. Edges lose their sharpness. And the land settles into a calm that feels familiar, almost expected. In the villages, the final movements of the day continue. People complete small tasks that require little effort. A container is placed in its usual place. A tool is set down carefully. A doorway is closed or left slightly open to the night air. Nothing is rushed. There is no need to hurry toward rest. Rest comes on its own. Inside homes, small flames appear again. Oil lamps are lit with steady hands. Their light is warm and contained, touching only what is near. The rest of the space remains in gentle shadow. These small circles of light feel enough. Enough to see. Enough to move slowly. Enough to let the rest of the world fade into quiet darkness. Families gather in these spaces, not tightly, but comfortably. Each person finds their place without needing to be told. Some sit. Some lie down. Some remain still, letting the day settle within them. The air inside feels calm. Balanced. Carrying the warmth of earlier hours, but now softening as the night deepens. Conversation becomes quieter now. Fewer words. Longer pauses. Sometimes silence holds everything, and no one feels the need to break it. This silence is not empty. It is shared. It holds presence. It allows the mind to slow naturally. Outside, the Nile continues its endless movement. Its surface now dark, reflecting only faint traces of what remains in the sky. It does not need light to exist. It flows the same in darkness as it does in day. Unchanging. Steady. A quiet constant beneath everything. Along the riverbanks, the world becomes still again. Plants do not move. Animals settle into their resting places. The land holds itself gently, as if conserving its energy for the day that will return. Above, the first stars begin to appear. Small points of light, steady and quiet. They do not demand attention. They simply exist, as they always have. More stars follow slowly, filling the sky without pattern that the eye can quickly understand. They remain distant. Unchanging. A silent presence above the resting land. Inside homes, people begin to lie down more fully. Bodies settle into familiar positions. The surfaces beneath them are simple, but known. Comfort comes not from softness alone, but from repetition. From knowing exactly how the body will rest. Sleep begins to approach again. Not as something that must be reached, but as something that arrives on its own. Breathing slows. Muscles release. Thoughts soften and begin to drift. There is no need to hold on to the day. It has already passed through every stage. It has already completed itself. Now, only rest remains. Some may close their eyes and drift into sleep quickly. Others remain awake a little longer, watching the small flame of a lamp, or listening to the quiet around them. There is no difference. Both states are part of the same transition. Outside, the night grows deeper. The sky becomes darker. The stars more visible. The air cooler. The silence more complete. And within this silence, ancient Egypt rests once more. Not in emptiness, but in fullness. A fullness of calm. Of balance. Of continuity. The day has turned into night again. Just as it always does. Just as it always will. And as everything settles into stillness, the rhythm continues quietly beneath it all. Unseen. Unheard. But always present. Like the river. Like the breath. Like the gentle passing of time itself. There comes a point in every long day, and in every long life, where nothing new needs to be added. Not because everything is finished,